We are going to complete our Speaker's Corner today with an industry that I'm absolutely passionate about. I suppose in many respects tourism is a bit like the phoenix that will rise from the ashes once we've managed to work out how to unclip the wings, but we will get there. And joining us to give his perspectives is the Chief Executive of Christchurch and Canterbury Tourism. He's formerly General Manager of Operations for Tourism New Zealand. Please welcome Tim Hunter.
Thanks, Mike. Kia ora tātou, kua hui mai nei. It's great to be here and look forward to sharing a few insights over the next 15 minutes or so. Just before I start, I want to say how great it's been to see the progress in the last couple of months. And I want to say a huge thank you to everyone in Christchurch who's put our electricity back, our water back, is working on our sewerage, and has flattened out our roads, because it's made a huge difference, and I've got to say the visitors appreciate it a great deal. Today for me is about not so much giving you just a definitive view of this is what tourism needs to do, because over the last couple of months we've been working on a crisis in tourism to try and patch up our visitor industry, get some demand back, get our visitor attractions working again, and getting some tourism dollars flowing into the city. So over the next 4 to 6 weeks, we'll be turning our minds to a new thing and taking some of the ideas that we've popped up on the screen today and saying we need to get out and talk to our tourism stakeholders, whether they be in transport, accommodation, hospitality or restaurants, and ask them some hard questions about what they think visitors need in a new Christchurch. And it's very clear to me it's a very exciting opportunity. Rebuilding a new inner city gives us a chance to fix some things in tourism that we know we need to fix and we could do better, but also create some new experiences and put a bit of spark back into our tourism product in the city. And I'd just like to start by just putting tourism into perspective. We're an industry that competes with the dairy industry for the prestigious title of being the #1 export earner in New Zealand. And foreign exchange is really important to New Zealand. And although we're not #1 this year, dairy's won out with very strong sort of commodity prices. We were certainly in the #1 position last year. So it's a very big industry. It typically produces between $14 and $17 billion a year for New Zealand. And here in Canterbury, it earns us about $2.2 billion. And employs about 10% of our workforce. So it's a big industry, it's an important one, it's got a very bright long-term future, and we certainly want to fix it for Canterbury. Something to remember, Christchurch Airport, it's a very important tourism hub. 85% of our international visitors that fly into the South Island fly into this airport. Around about 580,000 international arrivals a year, and we also get between 400,000 and 500,000 visitors coming in through other airports in New Zealand, mainly from the North Island. They'll come in by domestic air, they'll come over on the ferry, they'll come in on tour buses and trains and rental cars, but round about 1 to 1 million visitors a year coming into Christchurch, and it's extremely important. One thing we've learnt from our research, Christchurch is incredibly popular with international visitors. It is on most itineraries. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is it's an essential tourism hub, and that's where a lot of the tourism plant for the South Island is, in terms of coach fleets, motorhome fleets, car rental fleets, etc. It's also a place that people come to sort of launch their tourism dreams, the products that they've come to New Zealand to do. We have this collection of fantastic day trips out of Christchurch, things like the Transalpine Express, getting over to Akaroa for a day trip, incredibly popular, heading up to Hanma, going up to Kaikoura to go whale watching. The younger people love the Rangitata Rafts experience, and we often get loads of people going down to do that every day. So it's a fantastic place to launch those holidays. It's also a place where visitors love our Englishness. And we particularly find this from older people. Asian visitors love our Englishness. The Japanese think it's very cool. Our heritage buildings are important. Our parks and gardens are outstanding. The Christchurch Botanic Gardens, Hagley Park, I think something like the fourth largest urban park in the world, an absolute asset to the city. And our visitor research says it's our Canterbury hospitality is also right up there in terms of visitor satisfaction. So we want to be in a position in the future to be able to get those visitors back. That hospitality factors are very important. It's also a place for people to come to try our local food and wine. It's an important part of any visitor's international experiences. It's not just going to a place, but actually eating the food, drinking the wine, discovering new restaurants. Those evening hours are very important. One thing I want to emphasise is that whatever we do in the future, it won't just be done by marketing and puffery. It's that visitor experience that's going to be the primary driver of our future success and our future demand. And there's a very simple reason for that. Social media, online communication will define to the world how good our tourism experience is. We cannot hide. This is a world where word of mouth is probably the most influential factor in tourism. So whatever we do, we really need to focus on the rebuild of Christchurch. Is how good is that tourism experience? Is it going to be internationally world class? One thing I've observed since I started my role in December is how extraordinary that inner city population is in terms of the tourism numbers. In the summertime, you go into the city at night time, and it's very clear that most of the people you see walking around the city are actually visitors, and many of them are international visitors. It is important in this process that they have a proxy in us and the people that operate within tourism to represent their interests when we think about the future of Christchurch. One thing is also very obvious is that whole area of the cultural precinct has been an absolute treasure. And if you actually look at the numbers here, Christchurch Cathedral gets about 550,000 visitors a year, and more than half of those are overseas visitors. The Art Gallery, an incredibly important asset, much loved by visitors to the city. The Arts Centre, probably one of the most popular places on Worcester Boulevard. The theatre, the cafes, the restaurants, the retail, it's all really important. The museum, something like 600,000 visitors a year, and the Botanic Gardens just finishing that off. And that area, that strip from the Cathedral Square down Worcester Boulevard, has been well traversed and well tracked by visitors both old and young. And our view is that it is so popular, it's proven to us that that's probably a very important sequence of visitor attractions that we need to retain for the future. The question we need to ask ourselves in tourism is which type of visitors are going to drive value and yield for our visitor industry, not just in the next few years, but the next 10 years, the next 50 years. And we've got to be quite strategic about this because the complexion of visitors are going to change. The world is changing. There's been huge economic change in the last few years that will have some bearing in terms of where our visitors come from. And this diagram you see up here simply shows for the whole of Canterbury region how many visitor nights were populated by visitors from what country. And although we have very many Australian visitors, they don't form the majority, well actually they nearly form the majority, but not quite, Europe do, of the visitor nights spent in our region. So you can see there, Europe is quite significant, Australia is significant, Asia is significant, but when we project our visitor forecasts out in the next 5 years, international visitors are forecast to grow. This is a national tourism forecast to the Canterbury region by 22%. We may not quite get that level of growth due to the impacts of the earthquake this year, but we'll probably come quite close to it. But what we are noticing is that we are going to see a lot more Asian visitors. If we look at economies in Asia, what they're producing in terms of outbound travel, the new flights we've got with AirAsia, the fact that we've got Singapore Airlines flying directly into Christchurch as well, creates an enormous opportunity to get that growth. We're also seeing that China heads the list. Tourism New Zealand believes that China will produce more visitors than the USA within 3 years. So that's going to become a very important market. And if we get direct services from China into Christchurch, which I believe will be quite feasible and economically possible quite soon, that's going to be really important. Europe is going to be tougher because the economic changes in Europe have really depressed those economies. You've got the new taxes, the environmental taxes on travel, and you've got the prospect of jet fuel rising very significantly in the next few years. That's going to make that ultra-long-haul travel a lot harder. So Europe's a really important market for long-stay visitors for Canterbury and for New Zealand, but it may not do quite as well. Australia will stay strong, but the Asian growth will simply see its share increase. So what does that mean? Well, we would expect stronger growth from Southeast Asia, from India, from China. We would see people that more younger professional couples, double income, no kids, middle-aged couples, probably not so many older retired people, families, family trips, very popular for Asian travellers, really strong interest in our environment and really strong interest in soft adventure, and in some cases, Indian market surprised us, hard adventure as well. For these people, nighttime's important. Going out to eat, finding food they like, nightlife, doing things after dark. Casinos are even important. They're also big retail spenders. They're looking for natural New Zealand products. Quality retail will do very well with these travellers. So it's really important that when we think about that in a city, the complexion of travel is going to change. We're going to have to become slightly more Asian focused in how we deliver it. So getting ready for those Asian visitors, it's about accommodation and tourism operators actively employing for language skills. We're already doing this in our eyesight operation, but it's really important that individual tourism businesses think about how well they can manage these markets. Consider an Asian-focused dining precinct, not because we want to segregate these people, it's simply to make it easy for them to make their evening selections as to where they go. As I said, casinos, nightlife are going to be important. And Tourism New Zealand just this week came out with some research saying we've got to do a much better job with service standards for Asian visitors. At the moment, they are the least satisfied of all our international visitors. They're high-value spenders now. We need to take that seriously. And the other thing that's going to be important is tourism signage, tourism information. We need to get better at providing it in more languages so that the city really works for these people.